beseech you, O Lord, your grace into our hearts, that we to whom the incarnation of Christ, your Son, was made known by the message of an angel, may by his passion and cross be brought to the glory of his resurrection, through the same Christ our Lord. Amen.
This is Newsnight, where we go above and beyond the headlines. I'm Pia Ontiveros. Tonight on the program, the nation bids farewell to former President Fidel Valdez Ramos, who was laid to rest today. Economic growth slowed down in the second quarter. GDP settled at 7.4%, weighed down by high food and fuel prices. And K-pop group Blackpink is coming to Manila next year. The country witnessed today a state funeral for its 12th president. The cremains of Fidel Valdez Ramos were buried at the Libingan ng Mga Bayani in Taguig. The ceremony was complete with full military honors given his long life of service, both in the armed forces and in politics, including his presidency from 1992 to 1998. Ramos died on Sunday, July 31st, at the age of 94. And for the first time in recent memory, a sitting president attending the burial of a former chief executive. President Bongbong Marcos stood by the side of former First Lady Ming Ramos and handed over the interment flag to her. David Santos tells us what this gesture symbolizes.
It was the presidential thing to do. As chief executive, the president is invited but not required to attend the burial of a former president who is traditionally accorded full military honors. If President Bongbong Marcos was on time, he could have walked with the family in the funeral procession.
May we acknowledge the presence
But Mr. Marcos, perhaps coming from a busy schedule, arrived just as the graveside honors began. It was almost like things came full circle. 36 years ago, Fidel Valdez Ramos, or FVR, helped oust President Ferdinand Edralin Marcos.
the Philippine flag.
Today, the younger Marcos presented the folded funeral flag to Ramos's widow.
Traditionally, ang nakikita kasi natin is the most senior military officer, the one handing the flag dun sa mga naulila. No? But remember that the President is the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of the Philippines. Very fitting na ang Pangulo ang magbigay ng bandila kay Ma'am Ming Ramos.
A time-honored ritual as the nation bids its farewell to its 12th president. The ceremony still amid a backdrop of a pandemic, the former First Lady speaking for the family, perhaps overwhelmed with love and support. While in a moment of grief, it was also a time of celebration and of gratitude. While we remember a leader defined by humility, courage, and a life devoted to public service.
Sabi niya, kaya natin ito. Maraming salamat. Kaya ba natin?
FVR's burial serving as a reminder that there are things greater than politics, even for a brief moment. David Santos, CNN Philippines.
Pope Francis joins Filipinos in mourning the late former President Ramos. The Pope extending his condolences in a message addressed to President Bongbong Marcos and shared by the Catholic Bishops' Conference of the Philippines. The pontiff underscored Ramos's efforts in, quote, fostering the values of democracy and the rule of law during his years of service. For many, Fidel Ramos was a military man, a president, and a democracy icon. But for those who knew him very well, very closely, he was a good leader with a goofy, sometimes corny sense of humor. George Carillas has this story.
For Sam Ramos Jones, Fidel V. Ramos was a funny and thoughtful grandfather. He was born in 1992 when his lolo was elected president.
He has a very goofy sense of humor, a little bit corny, and that behind the scenes, that was even more present. He wasn't the type to, necessarily say, straight up compliments or like hug you and kiss you and say I love you and all that. But if he saw, for example, if he saw something that he thought you would be interested in reading, he made sure that there was a personalized clipping pack that he would give you about whatever given subject.
Sam and FVR shared their love for books, and their favorite, American Caesar, the biography of General Douglas MacArthur.
Still has a very full library that he would always let me steal from, but like a librarian, he would make me fill out a card and promise to return it.
Retired Colonel Dencio Acop, a longtime aide-de-camp of FVR, saw how he was as a public servant and a family man. He described him as like a superhero, a leader who can deal with anything and everything, even during crisis situations.
He was like Superman, si FVR, he was, his prowess was everywhere. His intellect, his leadership abilities, even his physical stamina was staggering. He would perform like 50 laps of the old Army Navy Club in Manila, and I could only do 10% of that as his aide-de-camp, so that was how he was.
Veteran journalist and Pulitzer winner Manny Mogato first covered the former president in 1987, when Ramos was the Armed Forces chief. On Politics as Usual last week, Mogato described him as a strict and snobbish officer. But then, there were also corny jokes to charm reporters. But Mogato says FVR became more charming and friendly to the media when he became president. Mogato also saw FVR's grace under pressure, even during death-defying situations.
Kasi marami na akong near-death incidents, no? Joining FBR sa mga kanyang command visits, no? In one of these incidents, yung aming poker plane nag-overshoot sa runway sa may Northern Samar, sa Tarman. And si FBR is very cool. Sabi niya, labas muna kayo. He was the last man to emerge from a burning plane. At pag-ubahin sa aeroplano, sabi niya, okay, let's get back to work.
Jones, Acop, and Mogato all agree that FVR was a workaholic and has the openness and willingness to work with people from every spectrum of society. George Cahiles, CNN Philippines.
When we return, the country's economic growth slowed down in the second quarter as consumers grapple with higher prices. And former vice presidential candidate Walden Bello has been released on bail after he was arrested for cyber libel. Stay tuned to Newsnight.
Dahil ito ay napatunayang may alpha, beta, at gamma mangosteen. MX3 capsule helps avoid pain, discomfort para iwas sakit. Tested and proven na low sodium, cholesterol-free, at fat-free. Dito ako sa tunay, natural, at original. MX3.
Mahalagang paalala, ang MX3 capsule ay hindi gamot at hindi dapat gamiting panggamot sa anumang uri ng sakit.
Fried chicken? Timplang happy! With easy-to-cook Magnolia Chicken Timplados. Iba't ibang sarap ng chicken, kaya. Anong Magnolia Chicken Timplados mo? Iba't ibang easy chicken sarap.
For my babies, only vet-approved Nutri-Chunks puppies. The only one with active boost and prebiotics na Pampalisto. Made with real meat with essential nutrients to help them grow strong and healthy. Happiness! Listo, ganado sa Nutri-Chunks puppies.
This is Newsnight on CNN. Rising costs of fuel and food have taken a toll on the economy as consumers tighten their belts. Our senior correspondent Lois Calderon breaks down the GDP numbers for us.
An economy losing momentum. From a growth rate of above 8%, it slowed to just 7.4% in April to June. a disappointing result versus median forecasts of as bullish as 8.6% from a Reuters survey of economists and government's 7.5%. The bumps came from record oil and food prices. As inflation bites, consumers cut spending, crippling an economy that depends on it 70%. Quarter on quarter, personal consumption shrank by 2.5%, with travel, hotels, and restaurants hit the most. Reopened borders and back-to-work orders would have been the fuel to rev up the economy. But these jeepney drivers say higher pump prices forced them to instead step on the brakes.
Dumami naman yung tao, kaso tumaas naman yung diesel. Parang wala lang din.
17 hours ang trabaho ko mula umaga Kasi kung maaga ako uwi, wala. Talo.
On the upside, farmers and builders are producing more. Economic managers say the Philippines is not the worst performer in Asia, tailing Vietnam but overtaking Indonesia and China. The inflation headache, after all, is everywhere, and the central bank already moves to tame it. Bangko Sentral Governor Felipe Medalla says the second quarter growth data was within government's forecast range, even if he earlier signaled that supporting the economy is not the BSP's priority.
I'd like to believe that the policy change would have net positive effects on the economy.
Average growth so far tops official goal. But because inflation still casts a dark cloud, economic managers don't expect the economy to accelerate as fast as the first half for the rest of the year.
The growth is likely to, be overall growth for the year is still going to be within the 6.5 to 7.5%. All you need is for the growth in the second semester is a 5.3% growth, which is very highly, achievable. It's very likely that we will be able to achieve that growth target despite the headwinds.
That's a steady pace to reach their 2022 goal. Lois Calderon, CNN Philippines.
At a time when a Senate committee moves to investigate frequent power outages in the provinces, and for the first time since he was appointed in July, Energy Secretary Rafael Lotilla faces the media in a virtual press conference. Lotilla vows to improve the country's self-sufficiency as he returns to take the helm of the department. Paige Xavier reports.
Energy Secretary Rafael Lotilla faces daunting tasks: to make power affordable and accessible, and to shift to clean power. But in his first press briefing, he admits the country is highly dependent on imported sources like coal and oil.
The longer-term solution, however, is to move from, again, the president says, from over-dependence on imported sources and to go for more indigenous sources.
With the Malampaya service contract set to end in 2024, he says it would be premature to comment until issues are resolved. But Lotilla says they're looking into other oil and gas exploration investments in undisputed areas and nearby fields. On the moratorium on the construction of new coal-fired plants, here's what he has to say.
I don't believe in completely changing policies and therefore sending mixed signals to investors.
Lotilla says the government will review the previous administration's study on nuclear energy alternatives for the Bataan power plant.
We would have to strengthen the trust and confidence of our people in the ability of government to regulate safely, to put up necessary standards.
The Senate Energy Committee, chaired by Senator Raffy Tulfo, will again investigate the long-standing problem of power outages in the provinces. Tulfo on Monday cited Oriental Mindoro, where brownouts are long but electric bills remain high. Lotilla did not directly comment on the upcoming probe, but he underscores the rich potential of renewable sources in areas like Mindoro. Senate President Mig Zubiri and Senator Grace Poe called for a review of the Electric Power Industry Reform Act, or EPIRA, to lower power rates, especially in the provinces.
We will have to take a closer look at how we should help, we should reorganize, we should strengthen the electric cooperatives. The EPIRA amendments that the Senate President and our legislators are looking at would have to consider elements of this reform.
Lotilia hopes his past experience can help address present-day energy woes. Paige Javier, CNN Philippines.
Former vice presidential candidate Walden Bello has been released on bail from Camp Caringal in Quezon City a day after he was arrested in his home over cyber libel charges. Former Davao City Chief Information Officer Jeffrey Tupas filed a case against Bello in March for calling her a drug dealer. Bello claims his arrest was connected to Vice President Sara Duterte and his tirades against her during the campaign, calling it, quote, pure political persecution, unquote. He slammed the former Davao City Mayor for, quote, weaponizing the law. Duterte says Bello should stop blaming her for his fall from grace, adding freedom of speech does not give anyone the right to defile the name and reputation of others. News overseas, authorities hold live fire drills in southern Taiwan as tensions with China continue to mount, but defense officials say these are not in response to Beijing's escalation of military exercises near Taipei. They say the drills are regular exercises to boost military readiness. While CNN's Blake Essig reports Chinese military drills around Taiwan have continued past the supposed end date of August 7th.
China's live-fire military exercises were supposed to be finished on Sunday. But earlier today, we learned that the People's Liberation Army continues to conduct drills in the air and at sea around Taiwan. It's according to a video posted on social media by China's military, saying that Monday's drills are focused on anti-submarine warfare and naval action. Now, in response to the ongoing drills, a spokesperson for Taiwan's Ministry of Defense says China's drills will give Taiwan's military less time to react, that it won't back down and will respond more proactively. Now, throughout the first 4 days of military exercises by China, Taiwan's defense ministry says that China simulated an attack against the main island of Taiwan involving cyber attacks, a large number of fighter jets and warships operating daily around Taiwan, with many entering Taiwan's air defense identification zone and some crossing the Taiwan Strait median line. Now, Beijing also launched nearly a dozen missiles, some of them flying over Taiwan for the first time ever. But according to military experts, one of the key takeaways from what we saw the past several days is that China demonstrated that a blockade of Taiwan doesn't require a constant naval presence offshore, and that shipping and air traffic can be blocked by the threat of missiles. And while we don't know what the future holds between China and Taiwan, the self-governing island, it's likely that what we're seeing from China's military, the increased tension and aggressive maneuvering, could be the new normal, according to Chinese state media. From now on, China will conduct regular military drills east of the Taiwan Strait median line, which is closer to Taiwan than mainland China. Blake Essig, CNN, Taipei.
In South Korea, at least 8 people were killed after record downpours triggered flooding in Seoul. The floods forced hundreds to evacuate. Homes, roads, and subway stations were flooded. Cars were seen submerged in water. South Korea's Interior and Safety Ministry says 3 of the fatalities were trapped in a flooded semi-basement. 9 others were injured, 6 are still missing. Authorities say the amount of rain recorded since Monday night in parts of Seoul is at 141.5 millimeters of rain per hour, the highest rate since they began keeping records. And back here at home, the southwest monsoon, or habagat, will bring rains in parts of the country. Forecasters expect scattered rain showers and thunderstorms over the Ilocos region, Abra, Benguet, Zambales, Bataan, Occidental Mindoro, Northern Palawan, and Kalayaan Islands. Metro Manila and the rest of the country will have partly cloudy to cloudy skies with isolated rain showers or thunderstorms for the rest of the night. Pag-asa is monitoring a tropical storm with international name Mulan outside the Philippine area of responsibility. The Public Works Department pointing to an unfinished drainage system at the Dolomite Beach in the city of Manila as the reason for heavy flooding in the capital. DPWH Secretary Manuel Bonoan told CNN Philippines rehabilitation for the drainage system along parts of Ross Boulevard is facing delays because of additional requirements from the Environment Department. He says work on the drainage may last until the end of September.
Hindi ngayon nagpa-function mabuti yung mga pumps natin ngayon. So we are upgrading them into bigger pumps. The problem really is actually when the Dolomite Beach was placed there, we need to secure the run of water, the dirty water affect the Dolomite Beach. They have required us to put up a sewer pipe about 350 meters towards Manila Bay.
Cases of the highly transmissible Omicron subvariant BA.5 in the country surpassed the 4,000 mark as the health department reports 906 new infections with 814 recoveries. There were also 11 additional BA.4 cases and 7 more of BA.2.12.1. All have recovered. On the issue of expired COVID-19 vaccines, the business group Go Negosyo says the private sector already discarded over 4 million doses. In a statement to CNN Philippines, Go Negosyo said they are in talks with the DOH on how to replace them. Health Officer in charge, Maria Rosario Vergeres, says the COVAX facility agreed to replenish all expired shots procured by the government and the private sector. Vaccine manufacturer Janssen Pharmaceuticals applied for a Certificate of Product Registration, or CPR, for its COVID-19 vaccine before the Food and Drug Administration. A CPR makes the product open for commercial use and is a way for Filipinos to get vaccinated once the state of calamity is lifted.
The FDA is currently reviewing and exercising the necessary work para po dito sa application ng Janssen sa kanilang tanggapan.
Vergeres adds emergency use of COVID vaccines and treatments before they reach the final phase will not be allowed if the state of calamity is lifted. This will also affect price caps on medicines and health workers' COVID-19 benefits. Moving on to monkeypox vaccines, the FDA is in talks with 3 manufacturers for the shots, the country also joining other ASEAN members to find ways to secure doses. Senator Cynthia Villar tests positive for COVID-19. She is the 3rd senator to catch the virus in less than a week after colleagues Amy Marcos and Alan Peter Cayetano, all 3 lawmakers, attended Tuesday's session virtually. Senate President Mig Zubiri says Marcos had fever while Cayetano is set to physically return to work next week. Cayetano's infection prompted stricter health protocols in the Senate, with guests now required to show negative COVID-19 test results. In other stories, getting a driver's license is costly and time-consuming, but that could change very soon as the government is on track to impose new rules. George Quiles tells us some officials are concerned those rules may compromise road safety.
Clarissa Paghubasan is applying for a driver's license. Paghubasan underwent 15 hours of theoretical course before she received a student permit, and then 8 hours of practical driving course as a requirement for a non-professional driver's license.
It would be better kung may sarili siyang sasakyan to practice din aside doon sa driving school. Kasi kung mag-rely lang sa driving school, I think maikli.
The Land Transportation Office is suggesting a shorter and cheaper training for those who want to get a driver's license. LTO Chief Chofilo Guadis urges that both theoretical and practical driving courses should only be done in at least 3 hours. As for the fees, Guadis wants standardized costing among driving schools. 80 pesos for online theoretical course and 500 pesos for classroom theoretical and practical driving courses.
Ang hihigpitan po riyan yung examination. I'll see to it that when you get the examination, you are given a really dressing on the rules on the road. Pag hindi mo na ipasa yan, then you have to repeat the process.
The Philippine Association of LTO accredited driving schools agree that theoretical driving courses must be shortened from 15 to 8 hours by removing repetitive topics in the LTO curriculum. But they suggest that the practical course must be longer to give extra importance to the actual driving training skills and on-site simulation.
Dito pa lang nagsisimula siyang sumakay o mag-aral ng sasakyan, maging familiar sa sasakyan. So, hindi siya bike na sa 3 hours nga mag-aral ka lang ng bike, di ba? So, sa kotse, it is a mechanical. Mako-compromise dito yung road safety, yung kaligtasan ng lahat.
The group adds that coming up with standardized prices for the training is unrealistic, citing varying operational expenses for driving schools, like rent, electricity, equipment, and salary rates of instructors.
We, PALAD, support LTO, okay? But it should be scientifically. No, the approach should be scientific. Hindi pwedeng naisip mo lang on your own opinion, personal recommendations.
The group hopes the LTO will also allow driving schools to offer optional comprehensive driving educational courses. This is to provide in-depth training for those who want to learn further than what is required by the LTO. The LTO meanwhile vows to meet with driving schools to discuss their proposals and come up with a win-win solution to the problem. George Cahiles, CNN Philippines.
Up ahead, tributes pouring in for Hollywood legend Olivia Newton-John, and K-pop group Blackpink announces its comeback to Manila. You're watching CNN Philippines.
Dangerous out there. Buti na lang there's locally superfruits. Para sa akin, super nutritious, super delicious. All superfruits contain more antioxidants than your average fruit. Superfruit for super you.
Life is many things. It's messy, but the kind of mess we love. Sometimes it's predictable, and sometimes it isn't. But there's always a way. And it's full of surprises. Introducing the next-gen Ford Everest. Life is yours to master.
Red Horse Beer. Ito ang tama. Sarap ulitin ng lakas ng tama pero di wasak.
Welcome back. Heading overseas, singer-actress Olivia Newton-John has died. She was 73. Olivia was known for bringing the character of Sandy to life in the film adaptation of Grease. Over the last 30 years, Newton-John was treated for several bouts of cancer, most recently at the base of her spine. Among the many stars who paid tribute was the Danny to Olivia's Sandy, her Grease co-actor John Travolta, posting, quote, "We will see you down the road and we will all be together again. Yours from the first moment I saw you and forever." Fans also paying homage to Olivia with a floral arrangement in her honor on the Hollywood Walk of Fame in the U.S. Shifting gears, you can expect Blackpink in your area again soon with the K-pop group heading to Manila next year. The chart-topping act will perform in the country on March 25, 2023 for its Born Pink World Tour. The venue and ticket prices have yet to be announced. And that is it for now. Join me again on news.ph at 7 p.m. I'm Pia Ontiveros. We leave you with highlights of today's state funeral for former President Fidel Valdez Ramos.
This program is brought to you by
RPN Radio Philippines Network DXTV Dipolo Radio Ronda.
Bacteria and viruses are always present, and they spread faster with the change in weather. With the rainy season upon us, we have to do what we can to protect our families. Bacteria and viruses are always present, and they spread faster with the change in weather. With the rainy season upon us, we have to do what we can to protect our families from seasonal diseases that range from the flu to waterborne diseases such as cholera and leptospirosis to even vector-borne diseases such as dengue. On this episode, we'll discuss preventive measures for these rainy season diseases and the flu. I'm Dr. Freddy Gomez, and welcome to MedTalk Health Talk on CNN Philippines. With us today is Dr. Alexander Huson, an infectious disease specialist from the Binyan Doctors Hospital and the Philippine Society of Microbiology and Infectious Disease. We're also joined by Dr. Ana Sofia Victoria Salazar Fajardo, a family medicine occupational medicine specialist from Perpetual Health Medical Center Binyan and the national president of the Philippine College of Occupational Medicine. The Philippines is obviously a tropical country, but when the summer season ends, our bodies will need to adjust to the rainy season. Maria, why does our immune system weaken during this change, especially during the rainy season?
Our immune system is really used to the warmer temperatures, no? Since we're here in the Philippines, our climate is always warm and humid, and any change in extreme temperature can always weaken the immune system.
Now, I'd like to ask Dr. Alex, during this rainy season, it's upon us already, what should our viewers watch out for? Ano yung mga diseases that should be prevalent or common ngayon na may change in temperature?
The most common diseases that we will be seeing during this season is the respiratory illnesses. So, most common yung mga trangkaso or the usual flu that we encounter. Also, in the advent of rainy seasons, of course, may mga flooding. We also encounter dengue, leptospirosis. Also, some other foodborne diseases will also be more common during these days, like hepatitis or acute gastroenteritis.
Could you explain to us what is the connection of the colder weather? How does this aggravate the spread of microbes like viruses and bacteria?
Since maulan, mas malamig, and yung mga tao, usually they nagkukumpul-kumpul, mas malapit sila, will all be contributory to sa pagkahawa-hawa na, for example, yung flu or trangkaso. Kasi mas malapit, mas increase ang contact with other people, then yung mga communicable diseases will be more prevalent during the season.
According to the Department of Health, the common diseases during the rainy season in the Philippines include, aside from the respiratory diseases, they also include diarrhea, waterborne diseases such as typhoid fever, cholera, leptospirosis, and vector-borne diseases such as malaria and dengue. Now, let's first talk about diarrhea. Doc Ria, why is this very common, especially among Filipinos and also during the rainy season, Ata?
So, of course, we all know that the very common means of transmission for diarrhea is foodborne or waterborne diseases. And sometimes if we do not wash our ingredients for our food properly, then of course it will be exposed to the bacteria and the pathogens in this raw food, no?
I'll ask Dr. Alex naman, let's talk about some of the waterborne diseases here. Among them is cholera, leptospirosis, and typhoid. Let's start first with typhoid, Doc Alex. Please explain to our viewers what this is and why should we be concerned about this?
Typhoid is caused by a bacteria called Salmonella. So maraming mga types ng Salmonella. And usually, we get it from the oral fecal route. So, nakakain natin yung bacteria which causes typhoid fever, or some medical terms will call it enteric fever. So, usually focus sa yan or sa enteric system or sa gastrointestinal system wherein it causes prolonged fever.
Doc Ria, what about, let's talk briefly about vector-borne diseases naman. Please explain to our viewers, especially napaka-common na ngayon ang dengue.
Dengue, no, is caused by the mosquito, and around our house, no, sa ating bahay, pagka may naiipon na tubig, doon pwede po magkaroon ng breed, no, ng ating mga lamok na nagkukos ng dengue.
Now, Doc Ria, what about malaria? Pwede rin mangyari ito sa Philippines, yes. Pero bakit mas napakadalas ang dengue kesa sa malaria?
Ang malaria naman po, nakikita natin sa mga clean places, no? Ang dengue talaga po ay dati lang during the rainy season. Ngayon po ay all year round na po nakikita ang dengue sa ating mga pasyente. So, kailangan lang pong siguraduhin, laging malinis ang ating paligid sa mga bahay at ating sa mga trabaho.
And apart from what DOH listed, influenza, or commonly known simply as the flu, also occurs all year round. Doc Alex, what is the flu equally as concerning as other rainy season diseases?
Kasi very communicable siya, masyado siya mabilis makahawa simply because yun nga, it's being spread through respiratory droplets. So, para siyang COVID. Pag-ubo, pag-sipon, and pwede siyang mahawa through droplets and also contact. Also, very common na makakos ito ng debilitating headache and body ache that will impair yung functionality ng patient na magkakaroon ng flu.
Now, we'll talk more about the flu and how best to prevent it later on in the show. But there are a number of illnesses to watch out for, especially during the rainy season. When we return, let's find out who are vulnerable to diseases in the rainy season and how best to manage them. Only here on MedTalk Health Talk. I'm Dr. Freddy Gomez and welcome back to MedTalk Health Talk, where caring is our calling. Earlier on the show, we discussed what the most common rainy season diseases are in the country. Now let's talk about who are prone to these infections. Now, as we approach the latter half of the year, people are more likely to leave their houses to work than before. Now, this also includes children returning to school as we slowly return to face-to-face classes. Let's talk more about who are the most vulnerable during this rainy season. Doc Ria, is there a specific age group most likely to get sick, lalo na ngayong tag-ulan?
Our seniors, those who are 60 and above, and our children as well, not the very young. We would like to also consider the most vulnerable, those adults or those patients who have immunocompromised conditions or yung mababa ang kanilang resistensya.
Is there any connection kung bakit ang mga senior citizens, bihira sila actually magkasakit, pero kapag nagkasakit sila, it is more likely na mas matindi ito, kumbaga trangkaso talaga. Why is this so? What should our senior citizens watch out for really? Please advise them para mas maintindihan nila.
As we age, the normal defenses of our respiratory system, no, yung meron kasing nagpo-protect sa ating respiratory system during our younger years. But as we age, etong mga defense mechanisms na ito ay medyo bumababa na ang kanilang function. So the more that we should be careful na hindi po tayo magkasakit, and because the more that they are prone to other diseases, other respiratory diseases such as pneumonia. And this is why we would like to encourage all of our senior citizens to have their flu and pneumococcal vaccination.
Now, Doc Alex, do you also have tips for workers who travel to and from their work, even students, especially those in university na madalas bahain?
Iwasan po natin yung mga possible sources of infection. So, it's good thing that wearing mask is mandatory is because of the COVID-19 pandemic. So that piece of cloth, that mask will protect the mga estudyante, mga workers na mahawa from other people who might have, example, sipon, ubo, or mga flu, trangkaso.
Now, Doc Alex, pag-usapan natin the vector-borne diseases, especially dengue. Binanggit ni Doc Ria na talagang dito sa mga cities, no, big cities, mas common talaga ang dengue. How can we protect ourselves, lalo na sa mga mosquito bites?
We have to remember that dengue mosquitoes are day-biting mosquitoes. So, usually, if you go into work in the morning, if you go to school in the morning, dyan yung sila makukuha. Pwede po natin, syempre, kung nasa office work tayo, try to look for the breeding places of mosquito. Most common dyan yung mga stagnant water. Check the area kung mayroong mga flower vases, mga baso na mayroong stagnant water, yung nakatingga lang na tubig, and we have to dispose of them.
Now, Doc Ria, tell us what basic medication should we have inside our medicine box during the rainy season? Should we stock up on antibiotics, Doc Ria?
So with regards to antibiotics, I would advise our viewers to please consult your doctors first before buying your antibiotics. But some of the common medicines that we should have at home are paracetamol, probably some cough medicines, some medicines to also address your runny nose or your colds, no, yung para sa ubot sipon, and even for let's say a tummy ache, no, yung ating mga para sa sakit ng tiyan, just in case meron nga po tayong mga sakit tulad ng diarrhea.
Now, Doc Ria, pag-usapan naman natin ng nutrition. What kind of food should we be consuming, especially now sa rainy season? Food that will increase or make our immune system more robust.
So we should drink enough water every day, around 8 to 10 glasses of water or more if you are in a hot environment. And of course, we'd like to increase our vitamins and minerals through fruits and vegetables, and making sure that our diet is well balanced, no? Having the right amount of protein, calcium, carbohydrates in the food that we take.
Now, Doc Alex, let's talk about, earlier on the program, we talked about typhoid, we talked about cholera. Please remind, especially parents of young children, how important it is to seek consult whenever they suspect na yung anak nila ay meron ito.
Yung common symptoms kasi nila for cholera, super dami na diarrhea that will cause dehydration. Also, typhoid naman will cause fever, prolonged fever, and late complications, pwede makaroon ng bleeding sa loob ng tiyan or ng intestine. So, very important magpa-consult po sa doctor po natin para mabigyan ng correct antibiotics.
So we've learned really a lot from both of our experts today when it comes to rainy day diseases. Thank you so much, Dr. Alexander Huson and Dr. Ana Sofia Victoria Salazar Fajardo, for sharing your insights about rainy day diseases. Coming up, we'll give you tips on how to boost your immune system against a year-round disease known as the flu or trangkaso, only here on MedTalk Health Talk. You're watching MedTalk Health Talk, and I'm Dr. Freddy Gomez. Now, throughout this episode, we've been talking about rainy day illnesses that we should all be wary of. Now, this includes the influenza virus, or more commonly known as the flu. Now, to combat the flu, we have vaccines that can protect us from these viruses. To tell us more about these flu vaccines, with us is Dr. Ana Ong Lim. She's a pediatric infectious disease expert and affiliate of the Philippine Foundation for Vaccination. Now, Doc Ana, we've learned that flu seasons vary all around the world. Now, here in the Philippines, Doc Ana, when should the flu vaccine be administered? When is the ideal time?
Rates of flu cases typically increase when the rainy season sets in.
So usually by the time nagbabago yung panahon, June, July, August, and also towards the colder months of the year like the November, December, January, doon tumataas yung ating cases ng flu.
Tell us, what is the benefit ba of the flu vaccine and how does it really affect our immune system?
Even if we think about it as a minor illness, parang trangkaso lang naman yan, pagpapahinga mo lang. Meron din kasing mga pasyente na nagkakaroon ng flu with really bad outcomes. They end up in the hospital or their underlying illnesses become more complicated. This usually happens for those people who are in the senior population or those with comorbidities or those in the very youngest age groups. So, we're interested in making sure that we provide them with protection. Paano naman yung mga regular adults na nagtatrabaho, maayos ang kanilang health status? It's important also for them to be protected kasi studies have shown that influenza disease can lead to a lot of absenteeism, and we also want to avoid that because that's the impact of that particular problem on our productivity.
Some people might be wary of vaccines in general. Now, as we've seen over the last 2 years with the COVID pandemic, marami talagang hesitations when it comes to vaccines. Can you explain the effectivity of flu vaccines and how they work? And meron ba talagang mga risks, kumbaga, ito sa katawan natin?
Flu vaccines, they're formulated on a year-to-year basis, Doc Freddy. Kasi ang ginagawa ng ating public health authorities, they do a surveillance of the types of flu viruses that are circulating globally, and then they will inform the vaccine manufacturers na dapat itong klaseng mga viruses ang tina-target ng bakuna ninyo. Actually, meron na tayong mga flu vaccines that basically been using the same structure as before. So matagal na ang safety and efficacy profile nitong bakunang to. When we talk about adverse events following immunization, typically these are the usual post-vaccination reactions like pain, swelling at the injection site, a little redness. May mga pangilan-ngilan, they'll really feel down after the vaccination, but that's not very frequently seen.
Can you still get the flu after being vaccinated?
I think in general, it's very important for our public to know na ang bakuna hindi naman niya pinapromise na 100% kang protektado. But it will really decrease the chances of you getting the illness. And in many cases, if you do get the illness, you'll probably get the more minor form.
Now, apart from vaccination, Doc Ana, we can also strengthen our immune system with proper nutrition as well as exercise. In the context of the pandemic, Doc Ana, how important is it to boost our immunity against the flu virus specifically?
Mas konti ang kalaban mo kung bakunado ka. So those who have been vaccinated against flu and eventually got COVID fared better. They had better outcomes compared to those who were unvaccinated. Boosting our immunity against COVID, of course, involves all of these measures that you mentioned. But of course, wag natin kalimutan dahil meron namang bakuna, why don't we benefit from these vaccines?
Can you share with us some tips on how to boost our immunity against illnesses, especially during the flu season?
The stuff that we remind people about to focus on during this pandemic, like physical distancing, wearing your mask properly, staying in well-ventilated areas, and hand hygiene are actually the same things that will help prevent influenza. Eating properly, engaging in exercise, sleeping enough every day is really going to help their general health and will help them resist lots of infections, including the flu.
Now, before we let you go, Dr. Ana, I would like to give you the chance to encourage our viewers to take their flu vaccines ASAP and let them know where can they get their flu shots, which is very important.
In the past 2 years, our focus has really been on COVID. But we should really not lose sight of all of these other vaccine-preventable diseases that we can avoid by being up to date with our vaccines. So I'd like to highlight influenza, lalo na we're already in the midst of the rainy season, and some of the infections that we think might be COVID can actually also be flu. So being protected will provide extra security and also, as I mentioned earlier, prevent these more complicated forms of COVID as has been shown in studies. So these vaccines are readily available for seniors. Our local government units have programs that provide them for free. And for other age groups, you can readily access these from your doctors who will always know or usually have these vaccines available because it's really part of our routine schedule.
Thank you for being with us, Dr. Ana Ong Lim, and for sharing your insights and, of course, your expertise as well as your time. I'm Dr. Freddy Gomez, and thank you for watching Med Talk Health Talk. We'll see you again next time.